Let's be honest, we're never that far away from another shark movie coming out, and yes, there are a few more shark movies coming out this year after this one. Director Haley Easton Street, however, brings us Something in the Water. And what's this one all about, I hear you say? Well, let me tell you the synopsis. It focuses on a bridal party of 5 female friends, 2 of which were lovers at one point, and they are going on this girls' day out before the big day of a wedding, and the 5 of them go out to this kind of deserted island that one of them has got kind of a, you know, an idea where it is, out of the way, deserted, etc. And it all looks lovely, idyllic, this tropical paradise, you might say. But whilst they're out there, one of the girls gets bitten on the leg by a shark, and in a panic, this group of girls gets on their kind of little speedboat type thing and at high speed tries to get back to the mainland to go to the doctors. However, in their haste, they strike a coral reef and end up getting the boat sinking and getting stranded in the middle of the ocean with, of course, a hungry shark nearby. Now, what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss, let's talk about it. But before that, we have to acknowledge that there is only so many ways you can tell a shark movie. One of the critiques I often see for any shark movie is, oh, they're all the same. It's the same story over and over. And you might get the odd movie here and there that adds a new element or a slight deviation on what we've seen. But for the most part, it's people in the open ocean, trapped, abandoned, stranded, surrounded by a shark. Because there's only so many ways you can really tell a story like this. I mean, you know. So we have to kind of bear that in mind, that we are somewhat limited in scope in regards to narrative when it comes to these movies. There are exceptions, and we do see sometimes, as I say, a little bit of a clever twist on it, but, you know, largely this is what it is. So let's get that criticism out of the way. But let me talk about what I do think works in this movie's favour. One thing that struck me is some of the decisions, emphasis on some of the decisions, are actually quite sensible from the characters. In too many movies, not just shark films, but horror movies in general, you often see people making dumb decisions. But I was pleased to say that, for example, in this movie, we actually get characters making some rational decisions and some sensible decisions. For example, you know, when the girl gets her leg bit, they get her leg bit and they go in the boat. First thing they do, let's try the phones. At one point, they kind of like put all the phones in a bag. You think, that's a conceit to get this bag lost, but they actually just go back in the bag again. So it's a little bit of a red herring. But I quite like that we tried it. When they're in the water, they're kind of trying to hold the phone like above the water to stop it, you know, stop it from getting wet, so they can use it. The girl that's legs gets bitten, they're trying to kind of elevate it and keep it out of the water so there's blood not going in there, things like this. You know, the first thing they do when the boat gets sort of a hole in it through the coral reef, they're looking for life jackets. So there are a number of kind of sensible, just little decisions, little kind of like areas of just sensibleness that you would just do in a situation like this. And I kind of appreciate it because it's so often the case where you just get people making dumb decision after dumb decision, and it just makes you annoyed because these people are just infuriating because they just keep making such stupid decisions. Now, they're going to come back to that because there are decisions that are made which aren't so clever, but I think it's done in a different way, and I'll just explain why when I get to the negatives. But yeah, there was evidence here at least of some of the time characters making smart decisions. I think the acting was quite solid in the movie, with the exception of one of the girls maybe, who I think overacts somewhat. But 4 of them were fairly good, so let me just say that. Yeah, so the acting was fine, and I do get the sense that this group had some camaraderie. It might even remind you a little bit of The Descent, where we have that group of girls going into the kind of obviously the cave system and stuff. Is that kind of camaraderie, very much like different types of personalities and things like that. But they seem like, you know, kind of friends who would be genuinely kind of chatting like this to a certain degree. So that I quite liked. I think this movie is relatively well shot. It looks a little low budget, but I think the movie does have a good attempt at trying to hide the budget, to be honest. For example, they clearly can't afford to do lots of actual shark footage. And again, I'm going to come on to the downside of that. But for the most part, what we see is fins in the water. But I think a little bit like Jaws, and I'm not saying this movie is as good as Jaws by any means, but you know, it builds up some suspense because we're not kind of seeing this thing. We all know what a shark looks like, but I think that kind of that fear of just this, we see this sort of the fin going past, and that looks very kind of foreboding, obviously, and scary. Just seeing that under the water, you can't see it, you can't see the whole thing, and maybe the reason is because when we do see it, it doesn't look so good. But I think for the most part, it's actually, you know, it's actually looks pretty good just the way they've done it. You know, we don't see a lot. We just see the kind of the fin and it's circling and things like that. There is one very good gore shot in this movie, and I was like, "Whew, blimey, that looks rough. Ooh, painful." One very good gore shot. And the movie is kind of quite well shot. Again, you might see a little bit of kind of the budget show through here and there, but I think if you based it on the fact that it is clearly a lower budget movie, I think they do a fairly good job here of actually kind of giving it a fairly kind of well photographed movie. I mean, there's certainly on the kind of the sea when they're in the water and stuff. There's one or two sequences where it may look a little, you know, not quite as strong, but fair. I'd say it's a fairly well shot movie. And you know, there's one or two kind of funny bits. There's a little bit of kind of like, you know, banter between the girls and some kind of funny sort of dialogue here and there. And I sort of quite like some of the sort of the way the characters, the actual bride, she's just very kind of like, for example, just a normal woman. Like she's very much like the sort of not a particularly glamorous. She just wants to kind of get married and do all that and kind of stop cooking, all that sort of stuff. She just seems very sort of like middle of the road, down to earth. So I kind of quite like that. So let's talk about what does not work in this movie. And I'm going to kind of go back on some of the things I've said and give you the flip side of the coin. Let's talk about the sharks themselves. This movie, you do not see much in the way of the full sharks. We see a few glimpses here and there of CGI sharks when they kind of breach out the water and things like that. They don't look good, but they are only on screen for a few seconds at most. You know, here and there. So I think it was the smart decision to not have very visible sharks a lot of the time. But I will say I think some people may get a little bit disappointed we don't see a huge amount of the actual sharks themselves. And as such, the actual kind of shark attacks are mostly off screen. It's pretty much people getting dragged under the water, bubbles with kind of like red and things like that. It's not actually teeth chowing down on flesh and things like that. So it's that kind of movie. It's obviously, it just cannot afford to do it by the looks of it. But ultimately, it's a little toothless. Let's talk about the decisions. Now, I like some of the decisions. However, when the movie wants to get a plot moving, a plot point going, our characters make dumb decisions. So I think just the everyday things, the kind of the sensible little decisions that people would make in this movie, they seem quite, you know, smart. They make good decisions. But if the plot wants to go to a certain point, it's time for a dumb decision. Let's all split up. Let's all kind of be at various different points in the sea and things like this. You know, there's a couple. I don't want to give too many away, but there's just some things here that thinking you've been quite smart in some areas, but in other areas we feel like the plot needs to kind of go from point A to point B, so someone makes a dumb decision. So in that respect, I feel yes, the movie does make the characters do some dumb stuff. One thing that annoyed me, and this is going to be a hard thing to kind of describe without spoiling anything, there's a little bit of over self-sacrifice in this movie. It's a shark attack movie. You're going to be expecting people to get attacked by sharks. I did not say this as a spoiler because I think you're going to expect this. But I had to say, I was thinking, I don't know about this self-sacrifice. I feel it's a little... I just don't know if people would do that. And it happened multiple times involving the same people. It's... I don't know, it just seems a little bit... I feel like we are kind of putting certain people's lives above others. That's all I'm saying. There's some other just like, what decisions, small decisions that just seem completely illogical. Not that the characters are making bad decisions, but just the film isn't showing us something. Again, hard to be a spoiler, you know, say things without spoiler. But then towards the end of the movie, you'll see a trio of people who just seem to sit back and let something, you know, not help someone, and thinking, why would they not be getting involved? Again, I'm trying to be vague here. The characters, as I've mentioned, I think for the most part are pretty well acted. There is one who I shouldn't really say who it is, but who I think is just way over the top, where it's a little distracting, to be honest. And then we have this, the prologue of the movie is this like inciting incident where our kind of lesbian couple, our main girl gets beaten up by a gang for being a lesbian. But for some reason, this is the whole impetus of the story. This makes this lesbian couple split up, but I don't see why. It's like it was nothing to do with them. This was just a random group of people that sort of passed them by and beat one of them up. But somehow this has caused these two to split up and then not talk to each other. I was thinking, well, how is that? I mean, yeah, it's obviously a painful experience, but how has that ended in this? The movie doesn't bother just go accept it. All right, it seemed like we need a little bit more context in regards to that. The movie also is a little on the melodramatic side. It keeps on calling back to that, oh, you know, we had this great love affair. And, you know, it's like, this seems overcooked to me. It's a little bit on the melodramatic side. And there's a couple of instances. The first time where we see our group of girls in the water and they see the fin going round, there would be sheer panic. There would be sheer panic in this instance. But they're kind of like, oh, it's probably just curious. I wouldn't worry about it. So that's the writing. That's the writing, the problem with these things. So this movie ultimately is a mixed bag. I don't think it's a bad movie. It's quite entertaining. I was engaged. I did find this movie engaging. And I watched it from start to finish without checking my phone and things like that, which is a good sign. But there are elements here that I think could have been sharpened up, were misjudged. And like I said, the sharks are really much in the background. So it's more of a relationship drama in the sea with sharks around it. But so how it shakes down, it's not a bad film by any stretch. But I wouldn't say it's particularly a good shark film in any way either. So to me, this sits on the bang on an average film. It's just kind of like an average shark film. Not bad, not great, just kind of sitting there in the middle. So it's a 5 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Please do leave me a comment and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.